Hello, and welcome to the Create a Life You Love podcast. I'm your host, Chantal Cox. My purpose is to empower and lift up others who know in their heart they're meant for more. More joy, more impact, and more passion. If you're ready to make a radical transformation and create a life that you love, then you have come to the right place. Let's do this. Hello, welcome everybody to the Create a Life You Love video podcast, where we connect with people from all around the world to share tips and strategies to help you on your own transformational journey. I am your host, Chantal Cox. I am an author, a transformation neurocoach, and podcaster who helps women that are facing life transitions turn their transition into their triumphant transformation. Just a reminder, this is being streamed live. So those of you with us, please feel free to put comments and questions in the chat, and then we will get to them as it makes sense in our flow. If you are catching the replay or listening to this on the podcast, replay people, you can say hashtag replay, and we will for sure respond later. Podcast people, go ahead and reach out to us on social media, where the links will be in the show notes. Also, as an incentive, those of you who are joining us live, the top participator today gets a special treat from our guest, which we will explain in a few minutes. So, speaking of our guest, I am super excited to be here today with Mischelle Saunders-Gottsch. Mischelle is the founder and CEO of Altered Stories Ministry and the podcast host of Altered Stories Show. And we are going to dive deep into her story and discuss how anyone can go from tragedy to triumph. So hello, Mischelle. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Oh, so amazing. And where are you joining us from?
I am joining from Leawood, Kansas, which is right outside of Kansas City. It's a suburb in Kansas, though.
That is so funny. And a lot of my audience is also in Kansas because I am in Wichita. And so we did not know prior to our couple minutes intro before hitting live that we were actually both in Kansas. So that is a funny little thing that I'm very excited about. Okay, so Mischelle, I'm so excited to learn about your story. So share with us your story of how you have created a life that you love.
Well, thank you. This is such a wonderful opportunity. My story is one that has really turned into triumph for me in terms of how I've been able to turn it around and take it for the better of others. You know, you either are bitter or you become better. Anyway, I come from a background early on in my childhood as a childhood cult survivor. And I was in a cult from the age of 7 up until 12. And unfortunately, as a result of that, me, my mom, my brother, my sister at that time, we experienced abuse. We experienced pastoral and spiritual abuse. And thankfully, we were able to come out of that as we got through our older years. My mother made a choice as a result of the cult leader who was exposed, and the media got a hold of him, and it was exposed, and the group at that time disbanded. My mom broke out of the cult, and our family went down the journey of healing. But what's powerful about this is when I went through my experience, my baby sister was very little, so she wasn't, I don't think, old enough to really understand. But myself, who was in that age group, of trying to really learn how to develop who I was, wanting acceptance, you know, in that age group, in all of the dynamics with that come in that age group. And my older brother really had, difficulty because we were ostracized in, the groups outside of the group that we were a part of. And it was very difficult to live, a normal sort of life because of the things that we weren't allowed to participate in. We didn't watch TV. We weren't allowed to celebrate holidays. We, had to, I guess, remove ourselves from those things that you would enjoy traditionally in, your school and your classroom because of, I would say the controls. There was a lot of controls that our family, were imposed on us. And unfortunately, this man dealt, he was very welcoming and warming and all those things. And a lot of people that were brought into his, his leadership, under his leadership, and wanted to be part of this cult. They were people who, they were seeking something. They were looking for a sense of community. And my dad was in the military, and my mom was too, but then she left to become a stay-home mom, but he was gone a lot. And so my mom was looking for a sense of community. She was looking for a way to bring her children into, a group of Christians where she could raise them in the way that she felt she needed to raise them as a Christian and a baby Christian. She was in that kind of place in her life. So anyway, the hardest thing I would say was dealing with how to exist in that kind of situation where there was, isolation, there was control, there was oppression, there was you could see people called out, if they weren't in line with, the way that the leader felt like they needed to be. And he unfortunately used, preyed on weaker people that were more vulnerable, in their lives. And so that was very difficult, to see that, me being who I am, and I'm a fighter, and I'm a person that believes in justice. And, even then, I really struggled with some of what I saw and how he humiliated people and he ran them down, and, how people just allowed him to come into their families and take over and, almost become, for those women that weren't married, the husband. And my mom, who was so vulnerable at that time because my dad was overseas, and that's when a lot of this really transpired more. But that, in itself really turned my stomach towards any kind of faith, any kind of Christianity. It just controls all of those things in my life. It really made me just want to remove myself from, those situations, those kinds of groups, those kinds of people. And so when my mom and dad both determined that they were going to stay married, and my mom made the decision to leave because they almost divorced over this because of the situation with my brother. It was chaos. In my family, it was just chaos, and it made it very difficult. So there was trauma, there was chaos, there was distrust, there was abuse, not just, emotional abuse. There was also other abuse that transpired by the hand of this man in the group that made it very difficult. So that also added different dynamics. So, carrying that, even after my mom made the decision and with my dad's agreement to remain in her marriage, leaving that group, trying to move forward, me trying to continue to, go forward in my life. And that time I was in junior high and going into, my years of teenage and into high school. There was just a lot of anger. There was a tremendous amount of anger I went through, and there was distrust. And my mom and I, we had a very hard relationship because there was just a lot of that from, the anger from my past that I had to deal with. And, the great thing though is that my mom made the decision to leave, and the healing process could start. And then, even though my mom and dad lost custody of my brother as a result of what had transpired, we could still somehow remain a family. And that, even though there was lots of challenges with that, what that did is it made me learn how to overcome the difficulties of, trauma and abuse and chaos. And, I didn't run from it per se. I just immersed myself into very positive things. And so what that did for me is it helped me start to build my esteem. My esteem was just so beaten down, and it took so long through, the years of trying to learn how to adjust and to work through what I had come out of. And thankfully, there were counselors and there were people that God put in my life. And, I, at some point, had to resolve the anger, and I had to resolve, my hatred towards others that were, people that profess to be Christians. And, the wonderful part of this story is that God knew all this. He's such a personal God in my life, and he knew exactly who to send into my life to begin the journey of healing and transformation, and brought the right groups of women or just positive things that helped me really overcome a lot of my fears, because a lot of it was just fear, and then of course seeing my mom step up into the accountability she needed to in asking forgiveness and taking responsibility for her actions and putting us in it. And I realized I had to make it better or bitter in my life. And so I'm not a person that believes that you just sit around and, oh man, woe is me, woe is me. I'm a person that just believes that you have to take the bull by the horns, and you have to keep going. And as a result, sometimes, there's unfortunate things that transpire and happen, but you have to own it. You have to go in there and say, okay, well, this happened to me, but I ran a long time from it. I mean, I tried to just suppress it and move on and immerse myself in all the other things. And there reached a point in time in my life when I had to really process what I'd been through. When I was, in my 40s, actually, is when it all came to a head. And I needed to sit down with a special counselor to help me go through and realize everything that I, had encountered and having to deal with it. And because it was affecting my mental health, because there were mental health issues depression and anxiety and all those things, but I definitely had it started to see an effect that it was having on my life. And that really helped me when I was able to do that and see, the blessings that come out of those types of situations, as hard as it is, and then really understand how to go forward and, make it positive. And so I found through my experience in telling my story and sharing my story, I walked around for a long time with all of this bottled in, pretending it didn't happen, moving forward, going through life, doing all these things, having kids, having a little girl, for just going, forward in my career, and, just kind of pretending like this was never anything. And when I really had to do the hard work, that's when the transformation, true transformation needed, that I needed, started to take place. And that's when I was, starting to share more in small groups, more with, one-on-one people I trusted, what, I'd come through. It started out with me really sharing it with a counselor who was really skilled and understood, how to deal with people who come through trauma like I had come through. And so that made a huge difference. And I saw that difference and what it did for me and what it did for others when I started to share. And I was, really, being transparent and authentic about, what all the emotions and what I saw and the disappointments in my life and, all of that, and that made a huge difference when I could really actually share it, because I was like, what is this going to do to my career? What is it going to do to my life when I start sharing this story, And then as I continued to go through that, sharing and realizing the real impact that had, just like I said, on me and others, and realizing too that there were other people that needed to hear and other people who've been through something similar, or, really understanding that it's okay, to, not deal with, these things, right away. I think that was the other thing too. Most people thought I was normal. Then, no, you would never have thought that I'd come through some of the background, there that I had come through. So that really brought me to my calling. And that's when I started getting involved, immersing myself. I was part of women's groups. I started getting into recovery groups for women. I started doing Bible studies that were recovery based for women. I started, I was a part of a retreat ministry for women where they would come in and, there was themes around it. And, I started also noticing that women would just start talking to me. I mean, everywhere I would go, it seemed like there was a very positive response I would get from women, and I'd be on the beach and there'd be a woman in the bathroom, and I just being who I am. Next thing I know, she's telling me about her lupus story, and I, all the things going on in her life. And, people would say, when they were telling me different women about different things in their life, they would say, why am I telling you this? I shouldn't be telling this. I don't tell anybody this, So, I mean, I just think God in his graciousness and part of my healing brought to me an incredible ministry and a calling in my life that helps women move forward in their life and helps them through their stories to be able to help other women through, their just authenticity, or also the women who still are healing and need to share their stories. And that's when I started this dreaming of this ministry and giving women a platform to share. And I saw great healing from brokenness and forming women's lives too, through the power of the story. And that's kind of what led me to setting up this ministry and nonprofit and the platform. This all over the world now. We've got about 8,000 listeners in about 40 countries. And, you know, the stories of the women that I share are very powerful, very, very transformational stories. And I believe I had to experience that. I had to share my story publicly, though, before these things started happening. And it was very difficult to do that. It took a while. It took a lot of courage, which it does for women who've come through great adversity and overcome great, great trauma and difficulty in their lives. And I think you take that tragedy, which I think was meant to be turned around, to be triumphant, just outcomes with triumphant outcomes. And that's what brought me to Altered Stories Ministry. And I'm out sharing my story now and all over, and getting ready to write my book, which will be a healing journey for women as they go through and read it. So there's a lot there. I don't know how much time we have, but I mean, there's a lot there in that story. I said at very high level, but trying to put it together for people that are watching today, so they have some sense, of what I encountered and where I am at.
It's amazing, Mischelle. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us and with the world in all the ways that you are doing that, which we'll definitely dive into. The reason I do what I do is because I survived and rebuilt myself, and then found it was very isolating. Like you kind of mentioned that, people look at you like you're normal, but then you're like healing with all these things and wrestling with all these things inside, and you think nobody else has been through anything similar. Nobody else understands. Like you're the only person. It's just so isolating. And so when somebody shared their story with me, and it was so impactful in my healing journey, then that was the first baby step in, oh, how can my story help other people? And you're doing the same thing. And so many of our podcast guests on the Create a Life You Love podcast are going around the world doing the same thing. And so I think it is a beautiful, beautiful thing that comes out of tragedy. If
Yes.
you choose. I wrote down, you said you can be better or bitter, or maybe you said bitter or better, whichever.
Yeah, I think I said better or bitter. Bitter, better.
Whichever one, but you have that choice. And I feel like there's another thing that you'll have to come up with and add to your better or bitter thing. But not only can you be better or bitter, but if you choose to be better, you could also go forth and like be a builder, or you'll probably do something better. But
I love that. I do love that. I am a builder.
Yeah. So helping other people rebuild, and then they turn around and they help people rebuild. And it's just really starting to build that movement and that momentum, and that using positivity to impact more positivity. So.
Yes, for sure. And there's so much to it. But it's simple, it's truly just taking your tragedy and turning it to a more positive, triumphant way of being able to live your life, which is what you're talking about. So not everybody can do that. It took me a while, I'm making it sound very easy, but it took years and years of really working through, and wonderful people, and getting my confidence and getting my courage built up, and having wins in my life and those kinds of things. But, my mom and I healed. And that's what's so cool is before she passed away, she knew I was going to do altered stories. And she did have, we did have conversations. And so that was really good. And she did ask, our family for forgiveness and knew that there were definitely, things that, she caused as a result of her decisions and, her also being vulnerable and her not being in a good mindset, I don't think either, and being brainwashed. I mean, there's truly, I think, a component of brainwashing that goes on with people. You just got to have such mental strength. So I've really learned to really focus on that too, and encourage others to really focus on their mental strength and keeping that going, because that is huge to keeping you from falling into these kinds of traps.
Absolutely. Do you have any tips for the audience that's maybe listening in on anything that they can do to work on that mental strength?
Well, being a faith-based person, I mean, I really lean into my faith in God. And so, I do spend time in prayer. I do, I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And so, I do nurture that. I do, go to church too, and I read the Bible, and I really believe in the Bible, and that, I do lots of talks and communing with God. And then, I try to keep positive information coming in, and I try to be around positive mindset and people. I'm very careful about who I listen to, who I expose myself to, what I put my mind on and around. I'm very just, I try to read really sound things. I try not to go, careful about what I fill my mind with and how I think. And, I try to really walk in step with what God has called me to do in my life too. And so, I think I glean a lot from that. You would think, oh my gosh, why does this woman have anything to do with God after what she saw? But it took years and years and years for me to, get to a place where I started opening my mind to even, being able to receive any kind of, Christianity in my life. And then God brought very sound, very stable people in that, getting part of a church. If you're in a church, or, just being surrounded by very stable, thinking and stable people, and watching who they are and where they come from, and, that as best as you can, and being discerning about that kind of thing. So, that's my recommendation. It's difficult. There's a lot that's thrown at us, but one of the things I can tell you too is social media, you've got to be really careful with social media, because there's just a lot out there that, you've got to discern and know, what you're seeing is it really what is happening? And, you just got to be wise about things you watch, things you read, who you put yourself around, your friendship base, your circle, your tribe, what books you read, who you associate with, and all those things.
So true. In my book, I kind of mentioned this little funny story of when I was in 6th grade, the very popular book series to read was the R.L. Stine Goosebumps, and everyone was reading them, and I was not allowed to, and I was not allowed to watch MTV, and I was not, my parents very religious and very, wanted to keep my mind sheltered and protected from all the negativity that the world has out there for us. And of course, like any 12-year-old girl would do, I snuck a book out of the library and I was reading it and I got busted. And everything I ever did as a child wrong, I always got busted. Like they had so many lines in like all the spaces of their head. And so my dad had a very serious talk with me, but, at a level, and he just said, you can put good things in your head or you can put bad things in your head. And if God came back right now and saw that that was what you were choosing to read and put in your head, would he be happy? Would he be pleased with that? And I was just like, oh, come on, man. Like, but it was so true. And it made an impact. And, it stayed with me and it ended up in my book and it, all the things. And so, yeah, exactly what you said. And you also mentioned the community around you. And, Jim Rohn talks about, you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you're spending time with people doing things that don't align with where you want to be in life, it's going to be really hard to heal where you want to be.
Yeah. And, it's unfortunate, but, my mother being an Air Force woman who came from a large Catholic family back east, who was looking for friendships and community, she became friends with a couple. My dad was gone a lot, in the Air Force and at that time. And she was looking for some sense of community. And, she got involved with this group and of friends who got brought her into this other group. And, before you know it, they're all under this spell of this man who's very charismatic, who's, really manipulative and controlling and knew their vulnerabilities and all those things, was a master at that, and I don't think my mother knew those people that well. She was vulnerable and then she was looking for friendships, and in the military, people move around a lot and it's very, very hard to have friendships, and I think that's can be a lonely place sometimes. She was a military wife there too. So, but we're just, I think tracking there with what you're saying and, what your dad shared and what I have seen. And, well, I think my mom did go off the beaten path there too, because she didn't have a lot of discipleship. She didn't have a lot there, around her in a support system, and I have, of course, quite a support system now. And I ensured that I did, and I just hope no one falls into this type of abuse, and there's still a lot of cults out there. There's still lots of people that prey on people, and sometimes it'll take people completely down financially, emotionally, mentally. There's all kinds of issues around it. And in the case of what you saw with Jim Jones and David Koresh, people committed suicide or killed themselves for these causes and these people. So
yeah,
it's very powerful. It can be very powerful. So the mental strength is so key so that you can stand up to these kinds of things. And that's huge too. So you don't get drawn in, so I hope I'm helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. Your story is powerful. And then the tidbits of lessons that you're dropping, I think are applicable whether you're healing from a cult or you're healing, like my survival was out of a narcissistic abusive marriage, and he was very charismatic and could find people's traits, weaknesses, and preyed on people. And so those types of people walk amongst us. And so
they do.
Being able to be aware of that and be a little cautious. I don't want to be so overly cautious that you end up like scared, not leaving your house and distrustworthy of everybody. There's got to be
right.
but you also don't want to be so naive like I was and just fall for it so easily. And yeah, yeah. So I definitely want to you to be able to share about your ministry and your podcast and your upcoming book.
Oh, okay. Well, as I think I've shared Altered Stories Ministry, and we're a nonprofit that helps Christian women share their God stories so women around the world can hear them. And we're headquartered in Overland Park, Kansas. We've been around a little over 2.5 years, and we're storytelling. We're all about storytelling and helping women heal through the power of story. And then the podcast is a brand of that nonprofit, and that's called the Altered Story Show. And I have about 64 stories of women who've overcome great adversity, and all types of stories, sex trafficking, survivor, domestic abuse, drug addiction, cancer survivors. I have stories of women who, have had mental health issues, have come out of it, been in psychiatric wards, divorce recovery, lots of women's challenges and issues that, women have struggled with. And so then our podcast, is also global. And so we're in 40 countries, and I'm starting to bring in women from other countries now who are sharing, some of their experiences in, areas that have affected them in their lives. And also my book, everything I do, I think, is around my desire to see women heal from brokenness. I've had this desire to do this from the time that I, started down the path of trying to heal from my own trauma and recovery and abuse that I experienced and encountered as being in this cult. And so that's what I'm trying to do, even in when I move ahead with my book and wanting to launch that at the end of 2022, where women can pick it up and go through it, and it will be a healing book for them, where they can actually process their own trauma and healing as they go through the story that I plan to write with. I'm working on securing my publishing company right now. And the woman who I hope will publish my book has also come out of spiritual abuse and trauma, and she'll be on my podcast here in a couple of weeks. So I'm very excited for all that we're doing, and I envision a storytelling conference, retreats, healing group, healing retreats, all those types of things. So, and I'm always looking for women to share stories, healing stories of redemption, where God came in and transformed them. And I've shared at conferences now about the stories, and they're so transformational. And that's what I love about your book. There's this transformation and change and all those things that take place. It's very powerful.
I love what you're doing and the impact that you're making on the world. And so how can people just learn more about you, connect with you?
Well, they can connect with me on my website at www.alteredstories.org. I'm actually out on Facebook too. I have a public image page. I also have an Altered Stories Ministry page and my own personal page. So those are some places that you can connect with me as well, or Facebook message me. I would love women that feel comfortable and, who want to reach out and would like to, have a conversation or just get to know what we do more, and listen to my show, subscribe to the show, all those things.
Absolutely. And we'll get all that linked in the show notes. So guys, definitely go check that out. Mischelle, I always like to ask every one of my guests what a daily non-negotiable is that they have.
Yeah. So, that's a really good, my non-negotiable is that gratitude. I just, I have so much gratitude having come out of the background I had. And when I broke out of the cult, there was so much freedom that came into my life. As a result, I felt like I was transformed and I was a new person. And then the hard work had to happen. But the one thing that helps me and keeps me centered is being grateful. And I am so grateful every single day I get up. And I thank God every single day for what he's given me and blessed me in my life. There is so much power in gratitude, ladies and men, whoever is watching this. There is a gratefulness awareness. Every year I do it's around this time actually, where I share this gratitude video. And it's just the way you look at the world that can make an incredible difference in how you live your life. And the gratitude journal, the gratitude, everything is around that. And we're approaching that season, right? So that makes a big difference in everything, I think. And of course, my faith, gratitude there. So.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's so much power in gratitude. And those that have been following me for a while know that, we talk about how it actually impacts the brain. And, they have brain scans and brain studies showing that you can't have gratitude and anxiety at the same time. And so when you're feeling those, just the daily stressors kind of kicking in, if you can be with it enough, which sometimes easier said than done, to say, hold on and just take a minute and think about something you're grateful for, and really kind of like just reminisce that and just roll around in it emotionally for a minute. It'll allow your brain to clear out all that yuckiness so that you can focus on the task at hand and go about your day.
Yes, that is so good. It is so good.
Amazing. Mischelle, before we close out, anything else you want to share with the audience today?
No, just thank you for those of you that are watching. Thank you for your graciousness and for being such a lovely host. Friends, live your life purposefully. Do. And if you do have areas that you need healing, do work on getting those so you can be and walk in your calling, walk triumphantly. I just want to see everyone to be successful in all that they do in their lives. And I don't want to see people being held up and caught up because of, wounds. So I just want women to get the healing they need. So do work on that if that's an area that you need, strengthened to do everything. But life is short. So do what you need to do and walk purposefully.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful message. Thank you so much, Mischelle. And thank you everybody for joining us on the Create a Life You Love video podcast. If you are finding yourself on a transformational journey, be sure to check out our newly released free transformation action plan. It allows you to just answer a few simple questions, and then you will get a detailed, personalized results with the top 3 things that you can implement in order to build momentum on your journey today. And so that link will be in the show notes as well. Next week, our guest is Colin C. Thompson. He specializes in personal development, diversity, and career coaching. And I believe he is located in Shanghai. So I love connecting with people all over the world.
Yeah, that's cool.
It is super cool. And we've been trying to get this scheduled for quite a while. So I'm pretty excited to finally connect with him. He coaches individuals and groups on how to reach their dreams, goals, and desires. So everyone, you can find us live in the Create a Life You Love community or catch it on your favorite podcasting platform at the same time, same place next Tuesday. Enjoy the journey, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Create a Life You Love podcast. I would love to hear from you about your biggest takeaways. Share them with me on Facebook or Instagram at Create a Life You Love Coaching. If you love this podcast, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. That's it for now. Enjoy the journey.